for the first time. I'm really listening to you. You just spoke my language.
Boston, at a glittering gala. A young interpreter spots a boy alone under chandeliers, fingers clutching a tiny robot gear. Across the room, his father, a famous CEO in a navy suit and red tie, owns the cameras, not the silence. One choice hangs in the air: learn his son's language or lose him. What will he say when the hands begin to speak? Boston winter pressed its nose to the Langford's glass while the ballroom glowed like a small city. Crystal chandeliers hung in tiers, throwing clean light across silver tables and donor placards. Waiters moved in quiet lines. Banners for the Children's Deaf Education Gala lifted in the ventilation draft, soft as breath. Maya Chen stood near the coat check with her tote and a black interpreter badge that had seen better years. She watched the room the way someone listens, patient, ready to find where meaning hides. She had lost her full-time school contract in the latest round of budget cuts. Now she pieced months together with freelance gigs and weekend classes. She reminded herself not to catalog worries tonight. Her job was not to be seen. It was to see clearly, which is why she noticed the boy in the shadowed alcove by the ballroom doors long before anyone said his name. Charcoal suit, hands in pockets. Shoulders tight in the way shoulders get when they have spent years absorbing noise that never turns into language. He was maybe 16. His face was watchful, not closed, but wary of being used. In his right pocket, his fingers turned something small over and over, a motion so steady it made its own kind of metronome. When the light caught it, Maya saw it was a tiny gear, brushed metal the size of a dime. Not jewelry, a part. On the easel by the stage, a slideshow cycled through sponsor logos and children's faces. A caption flashed for a beat. Leo Whitaker, age 16, deaf since post-meningitis at 6. Maya felt the way facts can be both true and incomplete. She let herself look back at him again. Leo Whitaker, alone in a room that claimed him. Cameras erupted near the main entrance, a sudden bloom of flashes and lifted phones. The crowd tipped toward the commotion. The man at the center moved with a calm that bent attention in his favor. Graham Whitaker, the reason the lights were this bright and the reason the hotel delivered their best linen. Tall, muscular, perfect posture, dark brown hair brushed to the side, streaked with just enough gray to look earned. A crisp white shirt and a navy suit that fit like a promise. A red tie, steady as a heartbeat line. When he smiled, people stepped closer without meaning to. He had the face you remember from magazine profiles, deep blue eyes, square jaw, thick brows that made every nod feel deliberate. He shook hands in a measured rhythm, the flash of cufflinks, the quick clasp of a shoulder. He did not look toward the alcove, not once. Maya watched Leo watch his father's arrival the way you watch a door that never opens. A donor in sequins drifted past Maya. "There he is," the woman whispered, as if spotting a comet. "Brilliant man. Built half the city's networks." Her friend nodded. "And that son. So inspiring." They moved on before the sentence had time to be questioned. Maya crossed to the refreshment table for water she did not really want. She scanned again. No interpreter assigned to the family tonight. A staffer with a clipboard directed volunteers. A photographer lined up a cluster of trustees beneath the largest chandelier. Somewhere, a microphone squeaked and then quieted. A cellist near the stage tuned a low, honeyed line that everyone heard and few noticed. In the alcove, Leo shifted. He took the gear from his pocket and turned it between thumb and forefinger. Up close, you would see its edges were faintly nicked, as if it had been fitted into and pulled out of prototypes 100 times. The object sat in his palm like a small sun. He closed his fingers around it, and the light went with it. Maya thought of the students she used to meet in hallways after class, the ones who waited until everyone else had left to ask for a word they needed to say at home, the ones who carried lucky pennies or smooth river stones or broken watch parts, not because they were superstitious, because touching a meaningful thing can remind your body it belongs to something that makes sense. "Attention, please," called the headmaster from the stage. Voices settled. Graham Whitaker stood with the trustees near the front. He glanced at his phone, then returned it to his pocket without breaking his perfect line. Cameras framed him, then reframed him, hunting for the angle that best translated aura into image. Maya set down her water. She checked the alley of movement between her and Leo. 2 servers. 1 floral tower. A row of silent auction gifts wrapped in cellophane. She felt the itch in her hands that comes when a bridge is needed and no one has started it yet. Unseen, she rolled her wrists to loosen them, fingers tracing the air with letters she knew by heart. She slid the interpreter badge into her tote. Tonight, her name might matter less than her courage. She stepped out of the anonymous light and into Leo's line of sight. He saw her as a shape first, then as a person, then as a possibility. His shoulders lifted a fraction, like a swimmer about to find air. Maya stopped 3 feet away, where faces can be read and hands can be seen. The chandeliers hummed. The red tie on the far side of the room burned like a small flag. In her chest, something steadied. She raised her hands, not yet speaking, not yet signing, but asking permission with her eyes. Between them, the tiny gear gleamed and waited, a promise that movement could make meaning. The gala music swelled, violins rising like silk in the air. Still, in that corner where chandeliers failed to reach, silence pressed heavy around Leo. He leaned against the paneled wall, eyes darting toward the crowd but never inviting anyone in. His fingers worked the gear again, metal flashing with each nervous twist. Maya steadied her breath. She lifted her hands. Slowly, carefully, she signed, "Hello, I'm Maya. Your name?" For a moment, Leo just stared. Then something shifted, like shutters opening in a locked room. Relief broke across his face. His hands flew up, sharp and quick. Leo. His lips curved faintly, the smallest grin. He signed, half joking, half bitter. "You sign? Good. Most just lip read. They make faces like clowns." Maya let out a quiet laugh, the kind you share with a student who finally sees they're understood. She replied, "I sign. I listen." Leo glanced toward the glittering stage where his father stood encircled by donors. He signed, slower this time, the shadows heavy in his eyes. "They hear him. Nobody hears me." Maya's chest ached. She signed back, "I hear you," and she meant it. Leo's shoulders eased. He tucked the gear back in his pocket. His hands told her more, about the school makerspace, about robots that whirred without sound, about sculpting motion into art that lived in vibration and light. He signed, "Movement is my music." Adults never cared. They only saw him when cameras flashed. Maya nodded, fingers tracing encouragement in the air. "Show me someday." His grin widened, then dimmed just as quickly when his gaze returned to the man across the room. Graham Whitaker, tall and commanding, raised his glass for a toast. Applause thundered. But Leo's hands fell silent. In that moment, Maya understood. He didn't need an interpreter tonight. He needed an ally. The music shifted, softer now, as though giving the ballroom room to breathe. Maya stayed near Leo, her hands relaxed at her sides, her eyes still holding his. But the air stiffened when a sudden ripple moved across the crowd. Graham Whitaker was walking straight toward them, flanked by his assistant and a photographer whose camera strap gleamed in the chandelier light. Graham's stride carried weight, calculated, unhurried, meant to be watched. He had the kind of presence that turned heads not because he demanded it, but because his very posture made people wonder what it might cost to stand in his orbit. His deep blue eyes scanned the alcove, landing on Leo. Yet there was no pause, no softening, only efficiency. "Pictures, now." Graham said, each syllable delivered with slow precision, as though stretching words could make them easier for Leo to catch. He didn't sign. He didn't look at Maya, though her badge and still-ready hands were visible at her side. His attention flicked only between his son and the lens waiting behind him. Leo's face closed like a shutter. Whatever light had risen there when Maya first signed drained away in an instant. He straightened, slipping the gear deep into his pocket. Without a word, he moved toward the photographer, his expression a mask. The assistant adjusted Leo's jacket, aligning seams, tugging shoulders into symmetry. The photographer lifted his camera. Flash. Another. Graham's hand gripped Leo's shoulder, not warmly, but firmly, like setting a product on display. Maya's throat tightened. She could see it all, the performance of family, the silent absence of relationship. Her hands ached to speak, to fill the emptiness hanging between father and son. But Graham's presence was a wall. When the photos were done, Graham nodded curtly, turned, and was gone again, already reclaimed by admirers and investors who swirled around him like satellites. The assistant followed, the photographer trailing with practiced obedience. Left in the quiet, Leo looked back at Maya. His hands lifted with a flick, sharp and biting. "See?" The word snapped through the air without sound, but with a weight that struck deeper than speech. Maya swallowed hard. In his eyes, she read something that was harder than anger. Resignation. The kind that doesn't come from one bad night but from years of rehearsed invisibility. She knew, in that moment, this wasn't about one gala. This was about a pattern carved deep. She clenched her fingers at her sides. Accessibility without relationship wasn't inclusion. It was theater. And theater, no matter how polished, always ended when the lights went out. Her decision solidified. Not here, not tonight, not while cameras were still flashing, but soon. She would not stand by and let silence be treated like absence. Not for this boy, and not for the father who didn't yet realize what he was losing. The ballroom swelled with applause as another speech began, but Maya needed air. She stepped out onto the terrace where Boston's winter pressed in against the glass doors. Lanterns glowed along the stone balustrade, their light spilling across marble tiles slick with frost. From here, the city hummed faintly, traffic lights changing, tires on wet pavement, a saxophone bending notes from a street corner. She wasn't alone for long. The door pushed open, and Graham Whitaker emerged with a glass of sparkling water in hand, posture still immaculate even away from cameras. His red tie caught the lantern light, bright against the dark. Behind him, Leo lingered, shoulders tucked into his charcoal suit as if shrinking from the cold. Maya hesitated, but her resolve burned warmer than the air. She stepped forward, speaking aloud and signing at the same time so Leo could follow every word. "Your son is extraordinary," she said, her voice steady, her fingers echoing each syllable. "But you can't see it if you don't learn his language." Graham froze mid-sip. His jaw tightened, eyes flicking to her hands, then back to her face. For the first time tonight, a crack appeared in his calm. "This is a private family matter," he said curtly, his tone clipped. His broad shoulders squared, as though authority alone could end the conversation. Leo signed quickly, his movements small but urgent. "It's fine." His lips pressed into a practiced smile, the kind meant to disarm and deflect. But his eyes, dark and restless, betrayed him. They pleaded in silence for someone not to let it drop. Maya held her ground. "Private," she said softly, "doesn't mean silent." Her gaze flicked between father and son. "It doesn't mean invisible." Graham's eyes narrowed, the blue of them colder now. Shame flickered there, faint but real, before pride sealed it over. He straightened, finishing his drink in one swallow. "Thank you for your concern," he said, his voice calm again, distant. He turned toward the door. Leo followed, obedient in step, though his glance back at Maya lingered like a hand outstretched that never touched. Then the door shut behind them, cutting the terrace back into stillness. Maya stayed in the cold, her fingers tingling from the words she'd dared to shape. She knew she hadn't won anything tonight, but she had drawn a line. And sometimes, the first line is the one that refuses to be erased. Morning light slipped across Maya's apartment walls, filtered by blinds she hadn't dusted in weeks. Her phone buzzed on the counter while she rinsed yesterday's mug. She expected a complaint, maybe even a warning to stay in her lane. Instead, the message made her still her hands. Whitaker residence. Mr. Whitaker requests your presence. Noon. No explanation, no apology. Just a summons. By noon, Maya stood in front of the Whitaker townhouse, a glass and walnut structure perched above the Charles. Its clean lines and tall windows made it look less like a home, more like a museum of success. She clutched her tote tighter, the interpreter badge tucked at the bottom like a secret. Inside, silence stretched differently, thick with wealth, framed by polished stone and curated art. A housekeeper guided her up the floating staircase to a sunlit office lined with floor-to-ceiling glass. Beyond the window, the river gleamed, busy with rowers cutting swift lines through the cold. Graham Whitaker sat behind a walnut desk, navy suit traded for a crisp shirt with sleeves rolled to his elbows. Without the red carpet glare of the gala, he looked almost human. His tie lay on the desk like an afterthought. He gestured to a chair. Maya sat, steady though her pulse raced. He cleared his throat, folding his hands. Leo was 6 when meningitis took his hearing, he began. His voice was lower now, stripped of performance. I spent years chasing surgeons, therapies, procedures. I threw every resource at fixing what was gone. He exhaled slowly, eyes focused on the river. But I never learned how to meet him where he was. Maya's chest tightened. She stayed quiet, letting silence hold weight until he filled it. Finally, Graham turned to her, those deep blue eyes no longer hard but unguarded. I don't want an interpreter between us anymore, he said. I don't want to borrow words from someone else. His jaw flexed, as if the next admission cost him more than any deal he'd signed. I want to learn. From you. Maya blinked. She had walked in expecting to defend herself, not to be asked for this. You're not hiring me to interpret? She asked carefully. He shook his head. No. A pause. To teach me. American Sign Language. To give me back a way to speak with my son. The air shifted, heavy with something fragile. Hope, laced with regret. Maya saw it then, clearer than the skyline beyond the glass. A man used to solving everything with power and money, finally realizing neither could rebuild a bridge he himself had let collapse. She nodded slowly, her voice quiet but firm. Then I'll teach you, but you have to promise one thing. This isn't about performance. It's about presence. Graham leaned back, the faintest smile tugging his mouth. Presence, he repeated, tasting the word as though it were new. Yes, that's what I've been missing. And for the first time, Maya believed he might mean it. The Whitaker townhouse study became a classroom. The walnut desk that had hosted contracts and quarterly reports now carried flashcards, alphabet charts, and a bowl of stress balls Maya used for hand warm-ups. Graham sat opposite her, jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, his broad shoulders hunched with an unfamiliar tension. Relax your wrists, Maya said gently, demonstrating the looseness of motion. It's not about force, it's about flow. Graham tried to mirror her. His first attempt at fingerspelling his own name looked more like a tangled stock ticker than a word. He grimaced. I've closed billion-dollar mergers in Mandarin, he muttered. But I can't get 4 letters right in English on my hands. Maya smiled softly. Language of the heart doesn't care how many you've mastered on paper. They kept at it. Fingers stumbled, shapes collapsed, but persistence stitched each failure into progress. Between drills, Maya wove in phrases she knew Leo longed to hear. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry. I love you. She slowed them down, guiding Graham's thick, capable hands until the movements began to resemble meaning. The first time he signed proud, his jaw clenched. His eyes flickered away. "That one feels foreign," he admitted, voice catching. "Not the shape. The truth of it." Maya didn't soften. "Then practice until it feels honest." Later, when she taught him "I love you," his hands faltered halfway. He pulled them back, resting them on the desk as if the phrase itself weighed more than he could carry. Silence stretched. His square jaw tightened. Thick brows shadowing eyes that had faced boardrooms without blinking, but now brimmed with hesitation. Finally, he exhaled. Work always felt solvable. A problem to manage. But grief... His voice thinned, his confident smile nowhere in sight. Grief was chaos. I buried myself in deals, thinking if I built enough, I wouldn't feel the collapse at home. Maya let the quiet hold him, no rush to fill it. Then she said gently, "Your son doesn't need a solution. He needs a father who will show up in his language, even if it's clumsy." Graham nodded slowly. "Clumsy, I can do," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips, though his eyes still shone. They resumed. Mistakes stacked. Laughter cracked through, and once or twice grief tried to spill out between fingers. But each attempt stitched something raw into something possible. And for the first time, Graham seemed to believe fluency in love might matter more than fluency in success. The makerspace smelled of solder and paint, the hum of 3D printers filling the air like quiet percussion. Students in hoodies and goggles bent over workbenches, sparks flashing, prototypes rattling. Maya followed Leo through the narrow aisles until he stopped at a cluttered table stacked with circuit boards and half-finished frames. He tugged a cloth away, revealing a sculpture unlike anything she had seen. Gears meshed with magnets, LED strips coiled through steel arms, and every joint was designed to vibrate in patterns. When he flicked a switch, the whole structure shimmered into motion, silent but alive. Shapes pulsed, lights traced arcs, and the movement carried rhythm without sound. Leo's hands moved quickly. "Movement is my music," he signed with pride, his dark eyes fierce. He pointed to the sculpture, then to his chest. "This, me." Maya's throat tightened. "It's beautiful," she said aloud, but also signed, "Beautiful." His grin broke, wide and unguarded, the gear in his pocket momentarily forgotten. He explained in rapid signs how vibrations could be measured, how motion could replace melody, how his world pulsed with patterns others didn't notice. He was preparing it for the STEM Arts Showcase. "Father, will, come, pictures, leave." His hands slashed the signs sharply, bitter certainty in every flick. Maya shook her head. "You deserve more," she signed firmly. Leo looked down, shoulders lifting, a defense against hope. He didn't answer, just adjusted the sculpture's gears until the LEDs danced again. Maya stood beside him, letting the silence breathe, the kinetic sculpture filling the gap. It moved like music, proof that meaning could live without sound, that beauty could pulse from a boy too many had mistaken for invisibility. And she wondered if his father saw this, really saw it, would the rhythm reach him? Or would it be just another photo on a company brochure? The high school gym had been transformed into a gallery, banners draped from rafters, tables lined with prototypes, and donor placards glittering under borrowed spotlights. Parents and benefactors milled about, sipping coffee in paper cups, murmuring admiration over drones, coded apps, and recycled art projects. The air hummed with pride and expectation. Maya slipped through the crowd, finding Leo near his sculpture. He wore the same charcoal suit from the gala, sleeves rolled this time, a smudge of grease darkening one cuff. His jaw was tight, but his eyes burned, alive with nerves and defiance. The gear rested in his pocket again, his touchstone. The headmaster greeted Graham Whitaker at the entrance with the reverence usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. Cameras followed, parents whispering, "That's him." Graham, immaculate as ever in navy and red, stood out like a signature written across the room. The headmaster gestured toward a tour, pointing to prototypes that awaited his approving nod. But Graham's stride faltered. His eyes had found Leo. The boy stood beside his sculpture, chin lifted but body braced, expecting nothing more than a flashbulb visit. Instead, Graham stepped away from the guided tour. Alone, he approached the whirring, glowing sculpture. The LEDs danced, gears clicked into patterns, the vibrations trembling faintly through the table. For the first time, Graham didn't see parts or PR. He saw intention. He saw a language written in movement. His hands trembled as he raised them. Slowly, haltingly, he signed, "This, beautiful." He hesitated, then shaped the next words with care. "I'm proud of you." The room hushed, the hum of small motors filling the silence. Leo froze, disbelief cracking into something brighter. He signed back, hesitant but strong, "Thank you." Maya swallowed hard, her eyes stinging. Around them, donors blinked, cameras lowered, whispers quieted. A door had opened, not with applause, not with money, but with trembling hands finally daring to speak. For the first time in years, Leo and Graham stood in the same language, and in that silent exchange, the room seemed to exhale. The gym lights dimmed, drawing murmurs across the crowd. The headmaster stepped onto the makeshift stage, his smile broad and his voice ringing through the microphone. "Tonight, we are honored to announce the inaugural Whitaker Global Fellowship, a fully funded year at one of the world's most advanced robotics labs in Tokyo." Gasps and applause rippled. Graham straightened in the front row, pride flickering across his features as if this moment had been meticulously scripted. Cameras swung toward him, lenses hungry. "And the recipient," the headmaster continued, drawing out the pause, "is our own Leo Whitaker." The gym erupted. Applause thundered. Parents rose to their feet. The spotlight swung, pinning Leo in its circle. His face froze. He hadn't been told. Not a word, not a whisper. The air around him thickened, applause pounding against him like a storm. He bolted. Maya saw the panic, the rigid line of his shoulders as he shoved through the crowd. She followed, weaving past startled donors and startled flashes. She found him in a stairwell, bent against the cold concrete wall, his hands shaking as they flew with furious speed. "Another year. Decided for me. No ask." His signs slashed like blades, fingers trembling with rage. His decision. His prize. Not mine. Maya's chest ached. She lifted her hands, steady, trying to catch his eyes. "I hear you. I see you." But his fury cracked wider. Years of this. Boarding schools, summer programs, always a show, never me. Tears stung at the corners of his eyes, though he blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. The gear slipped from his pocket, clattering against the stairwell floor. He didn't pick it up. Behind them, applause still roared, muffled now by walls. On stage, Graham surely smiled, cameras no doubt catching every polished angle, but here in the stairwell, his son's silence thundered louder than any ovation. And Maya knew. This wound cut deeper than a scholarship. It was a pattern repeating, dressed in new clothes. The stairwell door creaked open. Graham filled the frame, the applause from the gym bleeding in around his shoulders before the door closed and muffled it again. His suit was immaculate, his jaw tight, but his eyes betrayed unease. Leo's hands were already flying, sharp and relentless. Too late. Always too late. You decide. You control. His signs were furious, his body trembling with the speed of his language. Graham tried to follow, his own hands hesitant, stumbling. He caught fragments. Anger. Year. Tokyo. Betrayal. But the storm outpaced him. He glanced at Maya, desperation flickering in those deep blue eyes. Maya stepped forward. "He feels packaged," she translated, her voice low but steady. "Like every choice is just for your image." Like every program is another way to send him away instead of keeping him close. Leo's hands struck the air again. Not image, not product, son. Maya's throat burned as she voiced it. Not your product. Your son. Graham's breath hitched. He shook his head, words spilling faster than he meant. That's not what this was. I thought, if Tokyo happened, I'd have one more year to learn how to talk to you before college pulled you away. His voice cracked, too raw to be staged. Leo froze mid-sign. His chest rose and fell, sharp and uneven. His eyes darted to Maya, searching for the truth in her interpretation. She nodded once, faithfully. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, alive, pressing each of them to the wall. The father, terrified of losing the son he didn't know how to hold. The son, furious at being a pawn, desperate to be seen. And Maya, the only bridge between languages, realizing translation sometimes meant carrying grief from one heart into another without softening its edge. The stairwell seemed smaller, the air colder. Graham's hands lifted, trembling. He tried again, halting but honest. Sorry. I try. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't fluent. But it was the first sentence he'd signed without asking Maya to rescue him. The stairwell hung in fragile stillness. Leo's hands dropped to his sides, chest still heaving, eyes locked on his father. For the first time, Graham didn't rush, didn't fill the air with polished lines. He waited, shoulders squared, but breath uneven. Maya broke the silence softly. What do you want, Leo? Not what you're given. What you want. She signed as she spoke, her eyes guiding him to answer. Leo's hands rose, steadier now. MIT, Media Lab, home. He signed each word like it was carved from stone. Close enough to stay, to practice with you, daily. Not once a quarter. His jaw tightened, but his eyes gleamed with the fragile hope of saying it aloud. Maya voiced it faithfully, her throat tight. He wants MIT to design silent world interfaces, to stay close enough to you so you can practice together every day, not once a quarter. Graham inhaled sharply, his brows pulling together. His deep blue eyes softened, shame threading through the lines of his strong jaw. He raised his hands slowly, his motions clumsy but deliberate. Afraid. His fingers faltered. He tried again, steadying. Fear. Fail. Again. Fear. Not enough. He exhaled, lowering his gaze before lifting it back. The words stumbled, but Maya didn't need to interpret. Leo's eyes widened, seeing his father's vulnerability spill raw between fingers. For once, it wasn't money or programs or polished speeches. It was fear. Leo signed back, quick but not harsh. Fail to try. Worse than fail to speak. His chest heaved, but his hands were steady. Graham blinked hard, his throat working. Slowly, painstakingly, he signed, I want your dream, not mine. The sentence trembled, imperfect in rhythm, but true in weight. For the first time, Leo didn't look away. His eyes held his father's, searching for cracks, for doubt. He found none. Only fear, only love, finally spoken in the only language that mattered. The next morning, Graham stood in his glass-walled office with a folder tucked under his arm. His shoulders were squared, but his eyes carried a rare uncertainty. Maya sat across from him, Leo beside her, the boy's charcoal hoodie streaked with solder dust from another late night at the makerspace. Without ceremony, Graham placed the folder on the desk. The fellowship paperwork, he said quietly. His hands lingered on the cover before he pulled it open. The embossed seal caught the light. Contracts, travel dates, sponsor signatures, all tidy, all final. Then, in one firm motion, he tore the pages in half. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. Leo's eyes widened. His hands twitched as if waiting for the trick. Graham looked at him directly. "I won't decide for you anymore," he said. Then, clumsy but deliberate, he signed, "Your choice. Always." Leo's breath caught. For a second, disbelief warred with something brighter. Trust. Maya leaned forward, her voice soft. "Then what happens instead?" Graham straightened. "We rebuild. On new terms." Together, the three of them sketched it out on the whiteboard behind his desk. Weekly ASL dinners. No excuses, no cancellations. Silent hours at Whitaker Labs, where managers and interns alike would communicate visually, not verbally. Philanthropy initiatives steered by the deaf community itself, not by corporate optics. Leo signed eagerly, ideas sparking faster than the markers could move. His hands painted possibilities. Deaf-led R&D internships. Grants for students designing for accessibility. Projects that spoke in vibration, light, and movement. Graham struggled to keep up, his fingers fumbling, but he didn't give up. He signed back, slower, halting, but steady. "We build together." Leo smiled then, real, unguarded. He slipped the small gear from his pocket, setting it on the desk between them. A symbol, gleaming under the office lights, the part of a machine that couldn't run until every tooth meshed. For the first time, father and son seemed to turn in sync. The auditorium buzzed with summer warmth, families fanning programs against the heat. Banners hung in maroon and gold, tassels swayed, and rows of graduates sat in pressed gowns. Maya found her seat near the front, her interpreter badge tucked away. Tonight, she wasn't working. She was witnessing. Leo stood at the podium, cap slightly askew, gown sleeves brushing his wrists. He looked out at the crowd, then lifted his hands. The hush was instant. He began in ASL, crisp and sure, every gesture confident. Behind him, an interpreter voiced for the hearing audience. "I grew up in a world where sound was a door I couldn't open," the interpreter echoed. "So I built new doors. Through motion, through light, through design that speaks in silence." Parents dabbed their eyes. Students leaned forward. Cameras rolled. But Maya's gaze drifted to the front row, where Graham Whitaker sat with his broad shoulders hunched forward, eyes fixed on his son. Leo signed faster, his hands painting meaning. "Movement is my music," the interpreter voiced. "And tonight, I thank those who learned a new language so I wouldn't stand alone." Maya's throat tightened. Graham's hands lifted, trembling slightly, but he followed along, signing with his son. Awkward at moments, but steady. His deep blue eyes glistened, jaw tight, tears breaking free even as he kept his syntax intact. When the speech ended, the auditorium rose in thunderous applause. Leo stepped from the podium, crossing the stage. Graham rose too, meeting him halfway. Their embrace was fierce, unguarded, the navy suit wrinkling, the red tie crushed against the graduation gown. Over Leo's shoulder, Graham's lips moved silently, mouthing toward Maya, where she sat misty-eyed. "Thank you." The chandeliers above caught the tears on his face, making them shine like crystal. For once, the cameras didn't need to frame the moment. The meaning was already clear. Summer sunlight poured into the Whitaker townhouse sunroom, now transformed into a laboratory of wires, pegboards, and sketches pinned to cork. On the main work table, Leo hunched over the clear front chassis of his scholarship-winning sculpture, adding sensors and fine-tuning gears. The small metal gear he once carried in his pocket sat mounted at the heart of the machine, polished, gleaming. Graham entered quietly. No suit jacket today, just a rolled-sleeve shirt. He paused at the doorway, watching his son move with focus and confidence. Then he crossed the room and set down a folder. Its embossed title read, "Hands and Futures Initiative." "We're launching it next month," Graham said. "ASL classes for every manager, deaf-led R&D internships, Grants for deaf artists and engineers. It won't just be my company's project, it'll be the community's. Leo glanced up, a faint grin tugging his mouth. His hands moved quickly. Finally. Listening. Graham chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. Finally listening, he echoed, then signed it too, halting but honest. Finally. Listening. Maya arrived a few minutes later, notebook in hand, the faintest smile on her face. Graham extended the offer he'd rehearsed all week. Director of the program. It needs someone who measures impact by conversations held, not dollars pledged. That's you. Maya hesitated only long enough to look at Leo, who nodded firmly, then signed to her, "Yes, please." She smiled. "On one condition," she said aloud. "We build metrics on people, not PR." Graham's deep blue eyes softened, his warm, confident smile breaking free. Agreed. That evening, the three of them sat at the long dining table, dinner set aside for what mattered most. Graham lifted his hands, slow but steady, his broad shoulders relaxed, his jaw unclenched. He signed without glancing at a cheat sheet, each word shaped with care. I love you, Leo, always. Leo's eyes filled, but his smile was brighter than the LEDs on his sculpture. He signed back, strong and sure, love, you too. And, for the first time in a house that had known silence as absence, silence became language, a home where love could finally speak.